All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7:30 p.m. on Monday, May 5th, 2025. I am Brian Layton, the chair of the school committee, and I am calling this special school committee meeting to order. In accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast at a later date over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The meeting will be broadcast at a later date through the local access cable channel and on the public access Facebook page. It will be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. The agenda item we have is new business, finalist candidate interview for superintendent of schools, Timothy McCormick. We will be doing a 75-minute interview at 35 minutes. When there's 35 minutes left, we will note that, and when there's 10 minutes left, we will also note that. We have 13 questions for you today, and we will start with an opening statement, and at the end, we will let you have a closing statement. So welcome, and I open it up to you, Mr. McCormick, for an opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me. I want to start off by thanking the Lunenburg Public Schools team today for their graciousness in hosting me. I've been here since 9:45-ish, right in the middle of the storm, but I had a chance to visit all the schools this morning, some tours with the building principals, had lunch with the admin team for the district, and then I came back and met with some smaller groups this afternoon. I met with a couple students. I met with some teacher groups. So a fantastic day of learning more about Lunenburg Public Schools. I've driven by this school many times, but this is the first time I've actually been inside the facility. So it was nice to actually see the space and see what goes on a day-to-day. A little bit about myself. I know some of you have seen my resume and we've talked in the first round of interviews, but I'm a career educator. I've been in education now this is my 26th year. I started as a science teacher up at Central High School in Manchester, New Hampshire, which at the time was a school of 2,600 kids, the second largest in the state. So I started my career at a very large urban district. And after those 7 years of teaching and coaching, I knew that I wanted to get into administration. I came back home. I went to school in North Middlesex where I became the athletic director for 5 years. And I loved that role. Athletics were a big part of my life growing up. I was a college athlete as well. But I really saw my passion in school and district leadership. When I left North Middlesex, I went to Gardner Public Schools where I spent 6 years as an assistant principal and then a building principal at Gardner Academy, which was an alternative high school still in existence at Gardner. At the time, we serviced just over 100 students from both Gardner and school choice students in. And that was a defining part of my career in the sense that I was able to help build a school within a district that had a lot of autonomy. We had to be very creative. We had to put the right people in the right spots as far as teachers and personnel, because we were working with a group of students who weren't enamored with public education. They were disengaged with the process, maybe dropped out, came back to school. So we were able to really build some great programming for those students. We saw those kids finally graduate. We get them experience to go into either the workforce or college. We had students who graduated from the alternative high school, went on to college, which was a huge success for those students and their families. But very rewarding position in the sense that we were able to build some really great concepts and supports for those kids. I left Gardner, went to Northbridge for 4 years, which is a more comprehensive high school. And continued that work of growing programs. I was part of a team that wrote some grant funding for your innovation career pathways in both healthcare and automation and robotics, and was excited to see those programs get off the ground. I then transitioned over to North Brookfield, where I've been for the past 4 years. The first year, I was the high school principal, and then was appointed by the school committee as superintendent, in which I've served the last 3 years. But throughout my career, I think the thing that is most important to me is about building opportunities for success for all students. And I think we've done that with the programs that we've started, the programs that we've attained through grant funding, and that core curriculum that we've brought in, whether it's high quality instructional materials or really making sure that our students are getting the instruction they need. That's been at the foundation of my work in North Brookfield, looking at what our students need foundationally, and I think that speaks to our ability to bring in some really robust, high-quality instructional materials. We brought in programs for both our elementary school students, for our high school students. We've developed an alternative pathway to our life sciences with our advanced manufacturing component. So we're really excited about the opportunities that we're able to present students. And I think that's the kind of the crux of my work, is making sure that a school system has those opportunities for kids. And I think that I've spent the last, like I said, 26 years working towards building student achievement, student success. And that looks different for every single student, but making sure we meet those students where they are and we make sure that we provide them with opportunities to be successful, both in school and then after they finish their high school career. And so that's what I'm proud of, and that's really, when I think about what my core values are as an educator, that's right near the top.
Thank you.
Why Lunenburg? Why at this point in your career? Why do you feel this place is the right fit for you at this moment in your career? What about this exact role moved you to apply?
So as I mentioned, I grew up in Townsend, so I'm familiar with the area. But that's just a small part of the intrigue, if you will. I think that Lunenburg Public Schools, I know several members of the community who have their kids are enrolled here, both at Turkey Hill and at the high school. And they say great things about the school district. They think there's some great programming going on. There's some great co and extracurriculars going on. And their kids, and they are very happy with the education that their students are receiving. But I also see Lunenburg as a place for a lot of potential growth. When I look at aspects of the district and look at the work that the current administration has done in phasing in some really high quality curriculum materials, I think that work is great, but I think it's just beginning in a lot of ways. I look at the high school program of studies and I see opportunities for tremendous growth with looking at what our students would want after high school. And you look at that nowadays, and it's really college and career readiness. And I think that with the cost of college nowadays, some students, some families can't afford that. And they need to have options. They need to have viable options. They need to be able to leave high school and make that diploma worth something. And if they can receive some credentialing while they're in high school, that can lead to a livable wage job upon graduation. If they do not choose to go to college, that should be a real option for students. So I want to give students those opportunities. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity and growth that we can look at here. And I think it's all determined by what students and what their families and what the teachers are able to do. But I think there's a lot of potential here. I think of these small communities like Lunenburg, like North Brookfield, and they put a lot of onus on athletics, co-curriculars. I think there's a really robust history of strong athletics, music, and band, and kids really want to be involved with those parts of the school life. And I think those are things that we should continue to preserve, and I think that we can continue to move forward with some of the great work that we're doing outside of the regular school day. So I think there's a lot of potential here. I think this is a community that we can do some good work for a very long time. I'm at a point in my career where I know I still have many years to go, but I want to be in a place that's invested in the town's education for all students. And I think that there's a lot of, like I said, tremendous things going on. We look at some of the accountability data. We have 65% or plus of students who are scoring over 3 on the AP exams. We have a growing number of students who are taking AP exams. And you have a lot of students who are doing very well in the accountability measures that the state sets forward. So I think there's a lot of good things going on that we can only make better.
Any follow-up?
You mentioned something about students that don't go on to college.
Yes.
Do you think it's a realistic thing to suggest to people living in Massachusetts in 2025 that they're not going to pursue something beyond high school as their terminal degree, when the average high school diploma holder makes less than $43,000 a year? Like, that just doesn't seem like a thing that an educator should have as a goal or think is realistic. It makes no sense to me.
So the question is, do I think that students...
Why would you say that that this is a realistic outcome?
No, I think, so if I misspoke with that answer, what I mean to say is that I think that if a student decides not to go into college, right? And I know there's many different paths now. They can go to community college, they can get their associates, and I know there's different paths for different kids, different families. But if a student just does not want to go into college, right? I think we should give them the skills and the credentials, like I mentioned, that they could go into a position at, let's say, at Advanced Manufacturing Corporation. Let's say they go to Sterilite down in Townsend, and they have the skills, they have some of the training that they received in high school, where they could progress through those early years at Sterilite and make a livable wage and make a career out of it. That doesn't mean they can't go back and go to college after the fact. But I think, you know, when we put a lot of emphasis on going to college, which for a lot of kids that's where they want to go, but it's not always the end all be all for some students. And I know that, you know, from experiences with the students I've worked with, but also from my own children. Sometimes school isn't where they want to be right away. So you need to have those opportunities. And I think when we give kids opportunities with the appropriate supports, I think we set them up for success. So I don't want to ever say that a student should just limit themselves to a high school diploma. But if that's where they finish, what else are we doing as they progress through their grades 9 through 12 that sets them up for success after high school? And I think, you know, I think we can continue to look at that.
Any other follow-up?
All right. Please discuss your operational experience in budgeting. What staff do you rely on the most for budget preparation and why? How far out should a school district reasonably be projecting out their budgets? What does the budget preparation process look like for you, and what has worked well for you or not with respect for software or processes for preparation and information sharing? And do you have a copy of our questions?
I do not. No.
I didn't think you did. And I'm like, because our MASC representative is not here this evening, and she puts them on the table.
Thank you.
There's a lot of
There's a lot of parts for that one, so.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
on number 2, so
Okay.
the next page.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I'm currently in a district that is one of the smallest in the state. I think you're probably all aware of that. And so with that, there's obviously some real pros and there's some cons. And I think it's not a con per se, but one of the parts of the job is that I have to wear many hats. We have had multiple people in the business administration. There's business administrator's assistant position. We've never had a full business manager or one that's been a certified business manager. But that is the person who I've worked with to help develop and create FY 24, 25, and 6 school year budgets. For me, it's always been a collaborative process. When I was a building principal to now, I think it's a process that should start very early on in the fall, and I mean September, October. If the budget is to be initially presented in January, we should have conversations around what the needs of the building principals and the directors and where we're projecting our numbers, where we're projecting that we think, and I know it's very early and it's still early in the sense of where we see some of our funding mechanisms coming in. You know, the Chapter 70 formula, med school spending, you know, the kind of the merging of those two funding mechanisms or funding streams. We don't really get a full picture or a clear picture until probably about July. So it's tricky to kind of navigate through that process. Same with circuit breaker. As you know, we don't, you know, I typically, when I project for our out-of-district placements, we start at 70% reimbursement because we aren't really sure of a guaranteed 75% reimbursement until about now, about May typically. And transportation is still kind of a fluid number, right? So that we don't know where that's going to fall either. So the process starts early. And you can make an argument, and I would say this to this committee, that I think it's really ongoing. I mean, it never really ends. I've seen very strong or capable business managers where they can project 2 or 3 years out. And that's, you know, the practice we want to get into is looking at our enrollment numbers, you know, where the declining enrollment may be within the district per class, but also keeping a keen eye on our grants, our revolving accounts, and any other revenue streams that we may have coming to the district. You know, we're looking, when we look at our budget, we're looking at pieces like school choice and circuit breaker not being really places where we can save money. It goes right back into next year's operating budget, which, as we all know, is not what it was intended for, but that's kind of the reality of how funding is happening nowadays. So I think all those experiences have kind of melded into where we are now. I think that the system that I'm kind of in process with in North Brookfield is similar to how it works in Lunenburg, in the sense that we present the initial budget usually in January, and then from there becomes a roadshow. We take it out on the roads, and we talk to the Finance Committee, we talk to select board members. Finance Committee, I think very typical to Lunenburg, recommends a number to the select board. And then it goes, in June for us, it goes to a town vote, where the town really is the one who votes in the article. But I think the process, to answer your question a little more granular, it's ongoing, okay? And I think that the version that I presented back in January has changed a couple times already, and it will continue to change based on the numbers that we get from the state and some of the numbers that we get, you know, for our own expenditures the rest of the school year. So it's something that, you know, we need to be having a constant conversations with our principals, our directors, and members of the town committees, both finance and select board, of where we're at with our funding.
So how would you rationalize coming into a district like Lunenburg right now, who just had to cut $2 million, well, hopefully just 1.5. We're down to
Yeah.
1.5. So out of our budget, how does that align with adding on programs that appear to be more trade-like? We don't have anything that works in that direction. So when you, like, for example, even, I've been on this committee for 7 years, and now and again I say, wouldn't it be nice to have a business teacher? But we haven't even been able to do that. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, a couple different things. I think when you present a budget, you should always, my mindset has always been, you start with the level service budget plus whatever you think, whatever you feel the district could need and should need going forward. But a lot of what I talked about with the Innovative Career Pathways, for example, we didn't really add any positions with those things, with those programs. We've hooked up with a great group called the 1-8 Foundation, where we received well over $250,000 in grant funding to support programs like Project Lead the Way. We've had Project Lead the Way now in our elementary school, middle, and now high school for next year. With the Innovative Career Pathway, which really requires a STEM teacher, okay, and that 4-year progression through the Project Lead the Way curriculum, there's funding that's attached to that from the state. In the first round, it's up to $75,000 and then $50,000 each subsequent year after that for the next 5 years. So there's a lot of money that's attached to that. The 1-8 Foundation, like I mentioned, does support financially as well throughout the process. So you take a lot of that grant funding to get some of the durable equipment that you need to start these programs. And once you have those pieces, I think you're off and running. If you have a strong teacher, if you have a strong, let's say, STEM teacher in our case for advanced manufacturing, a lot of that grant support really gets us off the ground. It can make this program sustainable for kids. So it's that initial lift to get the grant. It takes a year and a half to write the grant. There's a couple phases of the grant. We're actually being honored this week down at Gillette for that grant designation. But once you get those things all coming together, that's where it comes to fruition. It becomes reality. So it's not really, you know, I know Lunenburg has a STEM teacher. So it's really getting that teacher, the training that's paid for through the grant, buying a lot of the durable equipment through the grant to get set up. All the PD is paid for through the grant. And that's how you get things going. That's how you build momentum. Now, advanced manufacturing is just one example. There's multiple pathways you could pursue. So that's just the example that I'm using. But you can look into health services. You can look into business, for example. And if you have those positions already in place, you can kind of repurpose some of the curriculum that you're using. And you can make it more robust.
You mentioned, kids going to companies like Sterilite, and we actually do have a fairly robust manufacturing community in this area. My wife is a general manager of a local manufacturer, national manufacturer that manufactures locally. Do you have experience with public-private partnerships? I'm sorry, I didn't turn on my microphone. Do you have experience with creating and nurturing public-private partnerships for these types of programs?
Yes, I do. We actually, as part of the ICP grant that I've been speaking about a little bit, we have a partnership where we had students last year. Currently, we have no students there but FlexCon, which is over in Spencer. It's a manufacturing company, and we had a conversation to restart a partnership with Vibram, which is right in North Brookfield, last Friday. They're under new leadership, and they're looking, as part of one of their new initiatives, is to really work with the community more, in schools in particular. So part of the ICP designation is you have to have seniors or students at the end of their high school career in a work-based learning setting. So that's 100 hours, over the course of typically their fourth quarter of school, where they might be out of FlexCon or Vibram or wherever else we find down the road. But those partnerships have started to evolve. Like I said, we had 5 kids who were part of the work-based learning who got compensated for it last year at FlexCon, and we're hoping to have some students starting in 26 at Vibram as well. So it takes some multiple conversations. Sometimes we have to come to some agreement around the age of the students that can be on the work floor, the workspace. So we have to work with their legal team to make sure we can make that happen. But we've had a lot of luck with that so far.
Any other follow-up? All right, Mr. Beerman.
I'm going to borrow Carol's microphone again because mine just shut off. How would those who you've worked with, how would those who worked under you describe you as a leader? What concrete actions have you taken to empower those around you to make decisions and move into leadership roles?
I think to the directors and principals I've worked with and teacher leaders, I would say that collaborative is the first word that comes to mind. I think that purposeful is another one. I think when we think about time is a precious commodity, and teachers, principals, superintendents, time is really valuable, and we're spread thin quite a bit. So when we have a meeting, whether it's a leadership team meeting, instructional leadership team, department meeting, whatever the meeting is, there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be a strategic plan for the district that trickles down to school improvement plans and then director plans that we're looking at and monitoring on a regular basis. I've got into a model where I meet with our leadership team weekly, and I meet with the building principals and the directors once a week as well individually. And that's to really look at what they're doing in their roles at a more granular level. Are they attaining their goals? And are we able to kind of look through our strategic and our school improvement plans and check off those areas that we feel like we've done a good job, that we're completing those tasks? And also, we can look at what do we get wrong, right? I think that's an important part of this position, is be reflective about what we missed on. If we had our 3 overarching objectives, which in our case, currently it's around instruction, belonging, and supporting all students. If there was an indicator within one of those 3 overarching objectives that it's not really relevant right now, you need to take it off the table and put something that's relevant back into that new plan. So we're constantly looking at where we're at with our plan and making sure that I'm supporting building leaders and being true instructional leaders within the buildings or within the district. My leadership style is not micromanaging either. I want to empower principals and directors when they're struggling with a decision to always ask me, to share information with me on what's going on within their building. But my job is not to be in your building doing your job. And I want people who are competent and strong with their decision making and also collaborative. We've done a really nice job, both building principals, of really building up capacity with their teachers and really building strong instructional leadership teams, whether they're grade level or by content area, and starting to really be data-driven with all the decisions. And I think that, in a small district like Lunenburg, time is very precious. And if we waste that time, you're gonna eventually erode trust with your leadership team and then with the staff. And that's where you can run into some issues. So if it can be sent in an email, I'm sending an email. If it's something that we need to meet about, we have a structured system for meetings, and we're purposeful with our meetings. We have our meeting norms, we have our agenda, but we know what we want to get accomplished. And the other thing too is I'm not always the singular voice in those meetings. I want to empower the directors and the principals to have a voice, to embrace psychological safety so they can feel safe to say what they want to say. But also, if they're an exemplar, if they're someone who is really astute with data analysis, I want them to help present about what they're doing in their school and with their staff members. So I want multiple voices in the room.
Any follow-up? I did have one. You spoke about trust of the staff. When your name became public for Lunenburg, information came to light regarding a previous relationship with a staff member in your former district. Given the importance of professionalism and public trust in school leadership, can you speak to that situation, how it was addressed, and whether the matter was reviewed internally or externally, and what was the outcome?
So there was a situation in a previous district where I had a relationship with a teacher. Full disclosure, I acknowledged that the relationship took place, and I left the district. To be completely frank with you, that situation was investigated both internally and externally, and I'm sitting before you today as a candidate for this position. One of the things I said earlier in the interview, and I'll say it again, is I'm a reflective person. And I think you have to be reflective and you have to own your mistakes when you're a leader. And I made missteps, I made mistakes, and that was one of them. And that was a mistake that, reflecting back on my choices in that situation, I wholeheartedly could have done better. And I took full responsibility for what happened. But I think moving forward as a leader in my current district, I think that I've proven that I am a person who is willing to work hard for our students and our families and our staff. And I think that I'm somebody who will continue to be a reflective and authentic leader for the students of Lunenburg Public Schools if I'm given that opportunity.
Thank you.
Sorry. Can you talk about your experiences with school systems within a small town and the cultural issues that you might need to be aware of in this particular role? And if or how that would change how you do approach the job?
This is question 4.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Well, I currently work in a small town, smaller than Lunenburg, and I grew up in Townsend, which is also another small town. I think maybe the same size as Lunenburg, maybe a little bit smaller. I don't know. They're all small. Small towns, they have a lot of pride in what they do. Growing up in Townsend, there was a lot of tradition in Townsend at North Middlesex. We had a lot of pride in what we did, both in the classroom, athletically, and those traditions. To the most of the time, you want to hold on to those traditions. But at the same time, school districts and towns need to evolve too. And I think that the education I received at North Middlesex, although it set me up for success both collegially and after, I think there are things that I would do differently, or I'd want to have done differently as a student when I was in high school and even younger. And I think that the people around me would say the same thing. But I think when you work in a small town, I think it's really important to have those relationships with families, with the other town leaders, whether it's chief of police, fire chief, EMS, finance committee, select board. All of those things, all of those committees and groups need to be part of my saved phone numbers and my cell phone. We're meeting frequently, we're talking about the future of the school district, but also if I need them, if they need me, conversely, that we can contact each other very easily. I think, when you come into a new community, and even though I know parts of Lunenburg, I don't know Lunenburg, I never lived here, never went to school here. One of the first people I'd reach out to would be the chief of police and the fire chief, just because I think when you think about public safety, think about the safety of our students in the school district, I want to get abreast of where we're at as far as our safety policies and procedures. Has there been any ALIS training for our students and our staff? And how do we message that to our families? And I'm sure there has been some work there. I'm sure there has, but I haven't done it here. So I need to learn kind of what we're doing in Lunenburg. And I've said this before too. I think it's really important. That I make connections with families. The school day may end at 2 o'clock or 2:30 or 3 o'clock, but the day doesn't end for most kids. The day just gets going. Classes may end, but families are now coming to the athletic fields, to a music production, to a play, to a STEM night, to a PTO meeting. I need to be available, and I want to be available. I want to get to know families and students and support them as they navigate this process. So I think it's really important that I'm a focal figure in the community in the sense that people know who I am, and that starts with students. I said this today multiple times. I want our kindergarten students to know who I am and what my role is when I walk in the class, walk in the building. If they don't know who I am, I'm not doing my job well enough yet. I want them to know who I am, what my name is, and that I'm another trusted adult in the district. And I think that's really important for kids to know, and families as well. And I think that's how we build capital. And that's how we make sure people know that I'm really truly invested in this school community, in this district.
Any follow-up? All right, I have question number 5. Student safety encompasses far more than just physical security. It includes emotional well-being, feeling seen and supported, and having equitable access to learning. In your current or past leadership roles, what have you done to ensure that all students feel safe and supported at school? What role should community partners play, including but not limited to resource officers and comfort dogs, public safety departments? What challenges have you faced in student safety, and what are your goals moving forward? What does a truly safe school look like to you from a student's point of view? So
there's multiple versions of safety. There's physical safety, there's psychological safety, there's safety for students to be who they are. Job number 1 of a superintendent and of a building principal, of leadership in any school district, is to make sure that students feel like they belong, that they're safe. If students don't feel safe, if they don't feel seen, supported by the adults in the buildings, then we're not going to get their best version. We're just not. And I think that's really, you hear that probably quite a bit, maybe even from previous interviews. And I understand that. But building that sense of belonging takes hard work. We've done a lot of work the last couple of years with Mass Ideas. It's a group that's run by Karen Thompson. It's an offshoot of MASS. And what they do is they come into districts and they work with teachers and then students around fostering that sense of belonging for all. And looking at supporting teachers and kind of building capacity around a vocabulary around how do we kind of make sure that we name or claim back if there's conversations around racism or bigotry. But more importantly, the work that we're doing this year is we're working with that core group of students to really foster student leaders around them becoming the spokespeople for our district. We also last year partnered with the Boston Celtics in their Playbook Initiative. And it was a very similar program where we sent 2 students, a teacher, and a principal to Boston for the day, for a full day of training. They got to meet some of the Celtics. I think Drew Holiday was there for the day. And then they came back and they did 2 sessions. They were mainly to do 2 sessions with middle school students around having difficult conversations around social issues, whether it's race, sexuality, religion. But then they actually did 4 of those sessions. This year, we're training that core group of kids again through Mass Ideas to continue to build on that program, to make sure that students feel safe and seen and supported. And it's one part of it to feel safe from the adults in the school, but by their classmates, that they know that they have the support from their classmates is equally as important. The other part of this is that physical safety component. We've done some work. My first year in North Brookfield as superintendent, we did a lot of work with the police and the fire around our intruder training, our ALIS training. Well, I don't think it's even called ALIS, but that's the old acronym. Yeah. But what do you do if someone were to come into the building? And we went over all those protocols. And it's ongoing. We did the table talk discussions when we had someone come over with a loudspeaker and say, there's someone in this room, what do you do? And we had the students work with their teachers, then figure out what is their next step. And those are things that we need to continue to have on a regular basis, because teachers change, we lose teachers every year, admin changes over, we have new students coming every year. So we need to continue to do that work so that students and families are aware of what's going on, and their students are receiving some conversation training around being safe. Additionally, I like to communicate every time we have a fire drill, every time we have to take someone out in an ambulance if there's a medical emergency, within minutes of it happening, so that families hear it from me that this is what happened, everybody is safe, but if you saw an ambulance, if you saw your kids walking down the sidewalk, it's because we had a fire drill. That was the reason why. Everybody is safe, the drill went well, our kids were great, but they know it they hear it from me, they don't read it on Facebook, they may still read it on Facebook, but they hear the exact or the factual information from me, and that's, I think, very important.
Any follow-up?
So last summer, we hired a person to serve as the assistant principal at Turkey Hill. And after she was hired, there was a controversy on Facebook about things that happened in her previous administration or previous job. The only reasonable summary was bigotry was the reason why people didn't like her. How do you create or foster a safe environment when the town that you're working in essentially has like a digital lynch mob on Facebook because of bigotry? How do you do that? I'm not saying everybody in town, but there is a group
Yeah.
of people on Facebook.
Right, no, I get it. I get the question. I think that, you could say that for many towns, right? There's a small vocal minority that is very toxic, very bigoted, to use your word. But that's reality. I think what I need to do, what the superintendent needs to do, is to make again, go back to making the school district as safe and welcoming as possible. I can't control everything else that happens outside the school. I can't. Sometimes I'd like to, but I cannot. What I can really control, and I don't know if I can totally control it, but I can do my best working with our leadership team and our teachers to make the safest, most supportive school environment possible. And like I said, I think schools need to be apolitical. Everybody, Republican, Democrat, walks through those doors is entitled to a free public education. And no matter where you voted, we want to give you that great education, right? It doesn't matter, which side of the fence you fall on. But I think what we can agree on is that a school community, schools, should be a safe place for all kids. And kids should not come to school and feel like they're being targeted, harassed, for any reason. And we need to make sure that we do a really good job of that.
How are kids gonna feel safe if the adults don't?
Well, I want the adults to feel safe too.
So what do you do for the employee who's being targeted by an online mob?
In this situation, was that person already on? Were they
Already on
employed?
staff.
They're on staff.
Yeah.
I think that as superintendent, I would support that staff member. I think, everybody has a different breaking point, right? If it's what they want to personally deal with, if it's too much for them, I'm not going to try to force them to stay on this team. But in that scenario that you're talking about, and I know some of that news story, I know it was picked up by a blogger from the state. And I know there's a lot of rhetoric around that person. I would go back to, why did we originally hire this person? We hired this person because we felt they would be good for kids. And we felt that they had something to add to our school district. And if they decide to stay as part of our team, I would fully support them. And I would message that as appropriate to faculty, to families, to students. And again, I know those are uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to kind of take some of that, because you, as a superintendent, you're not, or you shouldn't, in my opinion, go back and forth with someone through Facebook. That's not appropriate. So you have to kind of sit back and take a lot of criticism on your decisions, on things you do. But I think it's very important that you support faculty. That if you don't, you won't gain their trust, or you'll lose their trust if you don't support them. And I think in this scenario, like you just mentioned, I would advocate for that staff member.
Any other follow-up? All right, we have 35 minutes left.
We have 35 minutes left, and we have 8 questions to go. How much independence would you provide your department heads and principals in selecting their staff? And what would be the role of the superintendent in assessing the effectiveness of administration? What does an effective building administrator look like?
So I think it goes back to what is the procedure and policy we have in place for hiring. Building principals per MGL, they're the hiring agents for their individual schools. I think we're all probably aware of that. So I don't want to interfere with that process. I think that when we think about who we want to hire for our openings, right, there's a lot of variables that come into play. Is it a high needs area? Is it an area that, if we have a set amount in the budget, can we exceed that? Because this is a physics teacher, we need a physics teacher, and they're like, it's finding a leprechaun, for example. But I want to empower both building principals and directors to make those sound decisions based on what we feel is appropriate through our strategic plan, what we look at as priority areas within the school improvement plan, and what those teachers need. The one thing I would always challenge a principal on is when you hire somebody, obviously the first priority is their content area and what they bring to the table for their content or grade level. But also, what do they bring to the school committee outside the school day? Is this person potentially a coach down the road? Do they want to volunteer or start a new club? Are they going to be somebody who is in their car and out the door by 2:15 every day? Or are they going to be somebody who is helping out at STEM night or wants to volunteer at the prom? Those are things, when I was a first year, second year teacher, I was doing everything. And not that you need to do everything, but I want teachers to be fully invested in the whole school environment. And I've challenged principals, department heads who have done interviews in the past. Is this person not only great at their content or grade, but what else do they add to the district or the school? And if you can give me a list of things, then I won't question your decision. What I typically do, I've done for the past 3 years, is whenever a principal recommends a candidate to me, I always meet with that candidate personally. It's usually very much a formality where I give them an offer letter, but I ask a few questions that I just want to see kind of where they're at. And I ask them questions about what I just said. What else do you bring to the table besides teaching Algebra 1? What else can you do for our kids? Because I want to hear those things. I want to know what else they bring to the table for our students.
Follow?
So, Dr. Burnham has instituted a policy of hiring people regardless of their experience level. So like if it's somebody that we know is going to cost more because they're going to be on different steps. Would you do that?
I think I've done it. I think
As a policy?
Well, no, as a policy,
Yeah.
you
Go
want
be the best person.
You want to. I mean, it's you want to hire the best person. I know currently Lunenburg's in this situation similar to North Brookfield. Sometimes you have to be very mindful of the financial aspect. Do you want to hire that veteran who has 15 years experience, or do you want to take a calculated shot on a teacher right out of college? There's pros and cons to both. I mean, I think, I don't know if it should be part of a policy per se, but I think, you go back to hiring the best candidate. That best candidate is the more expensive candidate. If you decide to do that, you need to make it work on the other end, right? So if that candidate is $15,000 more than we allocated for that position, where are you going to cut from another position? You can't just keep adding, right? So you have to be mindful of, if I'm going to add this position, what's going to lose out on the other end? And maybe we can't hire, maybe we need to hire someone else who is fresh out of college that we hadn't intended to. So again, I think that's the conversation that I would have with the building principal. If they came to me with two candidates and both were great, it may come down to that financial ramification, especially where we're at currently in North Brookfield and where Lunenburg is right now. I think that's an honest conversation to have.
So how do you tell that to the parents? Like, we're bargain basement shoppers here.
I don't look at it that way. I don't. I mean, I think that there's a lot of I think back to some of the teachers I've worked with over the years who are fresh out of college. They're eager, they're ambitious, they're willing to learn, and I think those are calculated risks that you take. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We can move on from that person in a timely fashion. But I think with a strong mentoring program and strong supports for that staff member, it's really it falls back on the building principal, maybe the department chairs, maybe the superintendent or assistant superintendent to work with that student, that staff member to build capacity. Because if you're not seeing that marked improvement after 2 years, you will have to make a change. But I think within the first year, you can really put a lot of time and effort into supporting that new teacher. And that's what we should do.
Any other follow-up? Karen?
Okay. For some reason, I'm the money person tonight. In our current budget situation, we've been forced to have conversations about what in our school system are nice-to-haves and need-to-haves. What drives your view behind the things in a district that are absolute necessities and what are just nice-to-have? How do you communicate these views and decisions, and who are the stakeholders?
Nice to haves and need to haves. I think that going back to what we talked about earlier this evening about the budgeting process, I think that you don't develop or draft a budget in a silo. It's done with multiple input from multiple stakeholder groups. Even the high school council, part of their mission or their charter is to give feedback or advice to the building principal on how they allocate their funds. So you want to take all those pieces into consideration. I think we have multiple meetings, maybe sometimes not enough, to look at, what do we need? And those needs may shift based year to year sometimes based on where we're seeing testing data, for example, where we're seeing, a couple years ago we lost our ESSER funding, so we had to look at, okay, this money is going away, which was a huge supplement to our salaries for in most districts that was the case. So of those salaries, which are the ones that need to have and nice to have, right? And those are the conversations we have to have. As far as the messaging piece, I think that as you go through the different iterations of the budget, it's making sure that all the stakeholders, so parents, staff, faculty, students, kind of know where we're at. We just, within the last few weeks, presented our revised edition of the budget with all of our impact statements and our impacts if we go to this many cuts. And we had multiple cuts as far as personnel and programming. It was a very difficult conversation to have because it's, you're seeing the gasp, you're seeing the looks of the people in the audience who are hearing about the position that their children or child they love that particular teacher. It's not personalizing it, but this is the impact if we lose X, Y, and Z teachers and personnel members. So I have to be very clear in spelling it out to the committee and to the community about if we don't have this position, class sizes may go up. We may not be able to offer a full array of electives. We may not have art class at the elementary school. Those are realities of things that may happen. We may not have a librarian, and looking at those options. And it's going back to are we looking for continuous improvement? Because if we continue down this road of these cuts, that's not going to equate to continuous improvement. And I think we need to continue with that message. I need to do part of my role as superintendent is to articulate this is the impact, direct impact and indirect impact that these cuts will have on kids. Instructional coach is another one that often comes up, and that's part of the conversation we just had, is that the instructional coach is not a classroom teacher, but they are directly working with teachers through coaching cycles. They're directly working with teachers to implement new curriculum. So when they're not in the conversation anymore, that is more responsibility of the teacher. In our case, in the case of Lunenburg, is the building principal, assistant principals, and directors to help implement some of that curriculum. So that increases the level of workload, anxiety for those staff members. So all those things need to be brought into the conversation. And again, it changes multiple times throughout the conversation. We'll probably change 2 or 3 more times now because we're going to get more of a final picture on the school budget over the next month and a half. In our case right now, we saw a reduction in rural school aid, which will impact our budget for next year. But we may see a slight increase with Chapter 70. It won't offset the loss of rural school aid, but it will be something. It's just really where those final numbers land and what we're able to get from the community.
Any follow-up?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're doubly loud now.
Thank you both. A successful superintendent must bring strong relationships beyond the school walls. How have you worked with stakeholders like parents, unions, local businesses, the finance committee, the select board, or other town departments to align school priorities with broader community needs? How do you see your role as superintendent in fostering those relationships and ensuring the district's voice is heard in broader town conversations? Can you share a time when collaboration made a difference and how you built trust along the way?
So I've been part of, let me see, we're finishing up one right now, but 4 contract negotiation cycles in my, 4 years, because I was brought into the fray as a building principal for the first teachers negotiation that I helped in North Brookfield. And I think, like I said, we're still finishing up one right now, but all the ones we've completed over the last, we just ratified, or we'll be ratifying one in a few weeks, but everything we've done to this point has been settled in a very good space, meaning that we didn't have a lot of the negative fanfare, we didn't have a lot of the things you see on the news, with the threats of strikes and walkouts and whatnot. And I think part of that is because we have open lines of communication with the building reps, with the union. We don't always agree on everything, but we don't have a culture of we're going to agree to every little thing. We have a culture that, again, we may not agree on every decision, but we can have a conversation about it. Even if that conversation gets a little bit fiery, it's going to happen behind closed doors. I've tried to do similar things with both finance and select board with mixed success. I think it changes with the membership of those committees. I've had some great conversations with finance committees in the past couple of years. But as those numbers continue to shift, as we're looking at potentially much less net school spending this year, the conversations become more challenging. To go from 113 to 100% is a big decrease for our district. So those conversations have become a little bit more contentious at times, but those conversations are still ongoing. And you can't not have the conversation just because it's going to bring some contention, I guess. I think the one thing that I would go back to is that you need to keep showing up. You need to keep showing up. You need to get your story out. You need to make sure that people know your impact statements. This is your why. This is your why of why you're doing this or why you're recommending these potential cuts and the impact these cuts will have on our students and our families. I think you have to really make sure that you weave a very clear message around that. It's not going to persuade everybody's thought process. It's not going to get everybody on your team, but they can never accuse you of not giving them all the facts and all the details around what's going on into the budget. I really feel very strongly about working with parent groups. I think that as a building principal, I had a really strong relationship with my school council, and I have some parents in the district who are extremely great advocates for the school. Their kids are very involved with everything school life, and they really are invested in what's going on, and they want to be there to support what we're doing. And I always lean on them too. I always have, reach out to them when I need to, and I have the building principals reach out to them and say, hey, get their take on this, because this is something that's important to us, and I want to hear their opinion on that. One thing we started this year with our students is we started a superintendent advisory committee. So I also wanted to bring, like I did as a building principal, more conversation with our students around what they see as priorities for the district. We meet twice a month and we talk about leadership, but we also talk about what can we do now. I think that oftentimes when we get into these conversations, it becomes more theoretical. I wanted them to be able to do something and accomplish things this year, and we started to really put together some really robust presentations and some working groups that our high school students are now having more conversations with our elementary school students around what is happening at the middle high school. And if a kid has an option to leave our district, this is why we want you to stay. So it was really kind of, again, connecting those dots with our student leaders so that they have a real stake in what's going on, and they're having those forward-facing conversations with elementary school students around the great things that are happening at the high school.
Any follow-up?
What rights does a union member get under the Weingarten case?
what rights does a union member get from the Vanguard? Regarding due process and having
I'm just asking, which rights do they get?
my understanding is they have the right to have, whether it's a council or somebody there present for a meeting, based on whether it's discipline or termination or those kinds of things.
Any other follow-up?
There are times when you are challenged by a situation where you need to call upon every personal skill you have to work it out. Can you tell about a situation where you had to use your best skill and judgment to resolve a problem? How can that experience help us appreciate your potential as our superintendent?
There will be situations that will test our patience and our skill. I think the last couple of years, the budget process has been something that has been, it's multi-layered. It's not just looking at the finances and making it all work. It's having those tough conversations, working with those various stakeholder groups, and trying to either convince or sway people to understand that if this happens, it's going to be to the detriment of our kids, and holding firm on your decisions around the budget. I think that we've navigated that fairly well, but it keeps getting trickier and trickier. And I think that's where a lot of this position, a lot of the work around this position takes place, is getting to know the groups that make those final decisions and working with them to make what we feel as a district are the best decisions for our kids. I think there's also a time where you need to give something space, and I think what I've done sometimes as a leader, and I've had to reflect on it. Sometimes you need to give people time to think about what's being presented to them, what are the options, and what are the outcomes. We get, and maybe it's because of social media. I don't know, but there's oftentimes. There's a mentality to just continue to ask what you want, go for it, and never relent. And I think, that doesn't always work to our liking, and we need to be aware that people need to process the implications of a budget projection, a budget proposal, and before they can just give you a knee-jerk quick reaction. I think that's something that I've had to work on as a leader at times, where I need to give people space to process this, and to wait for a follow-up question or conversation, and that's something that we need to have happen.
Any follow-up? All right, question number 10. Schools rely on the daily work of many people beyond. Schools rely on the daily work of many people beyond classroom teachers. How do you build a culture where all staff feel valued and heard? How have you supported these roles, and how do you plan to foster trust and partnership, as well as attracting, developing, and retaining staff?
I think what I'm thinking of right now is when we look at our initiatives around professional development, and we've spent, like I said, we spent last year working with a couple groups around fostering that sense of belonging, but this year we've shifted that more to, and they're related, but we've shifted a lot of our emphasis to our instructional practices, building a culture of strong instruction and what that classroom would look like. Like I said, we partner with Novak Education around UDL. So that is a 2-year kind of process that we're undertaking with that group. But I did that based on feedback I received from the entire staff. So feedback I received from teachers through a formalized survey, from support staff. I think the next piece to that, the teachers were kind of the loudest voice in that decision. We need to do a better job of supporting our parent and support staff. And what other PD can we provide them? That some of the UDL PD has been relevant because they are supporting teachers in the classroom, but what other de-escalation strategies can we present to the support staff? What other skills that we need to develop within our support staff that we haven't fully done yet? And that's going to be the work, the ongoing work, is that those support staff, those ABAs that we have about 20 plus in the district that work with students, either one-to-one or in small groups, every single day. Some of our more challenging students, what are we doing to fully support those staff members? And I think that we need to have those conversations with them about what's worked and what hasn't. And I think, the one-size-fits-all with professional development, it doesn't work for every staff member. So we need to do a better job of finding what they exactly need.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Sorry. Can you address that question in looking at staff that is not traditionally seen as student-facing, such as central office staff, or secretaries, or custodial staff, or cafeteria staff?
Yeah, well, I think when you think about, in my opinion, every staff member, whether it's just cafeteria, custodial, there is definitely a benefit to having some of those skills available, if you will, around interacting with kids, de-escalation, having conversations with students. I mean, even if, cafeteria workers are working with kids every single day. Many of our custodians are too. And I think, there's probably room for growth at times with some of those staff members. And I think it's important for us not to overlook those staff members. At the same time with central office administration, I think that just like I want to be visible in classrooms, I want central office staff members to also be visible in classrooms and to be with students as much as they can be. If part of your job responsibility is analyzing data around a DIBELS examination, a DIBELS test, that's great. That's going to take up a lot of your time. But also, are you in the classroom observing the classroom instruction with a principal, with a teacher? Are you part of a learning walk? And I think that's really important that we calibrate and that all members of district personnel can do that, and we're all on the same page as far as what we're looking for within the classroom. But talking about support staff, like you said, even our bus drivers, we want our bus drivers to engage with kids in a authentic, meaningful, and also respectful way, and respect our kids' differences as well. And sometimes I think we need to intervene a little bit, and I think we need to do a better job of keeping those staff members in the conversation around those items.
In North Brookfield, do you folks suffer from some of the challenges we've had here in Lunenburg around retention of custodians, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, those types of roles? And how have you come at that in terms of from a retention perspective?
Some, yes. I think that we have, and I think it's been probably across all negotiating groups, but we have some core paras and custodians that have been there for 15, 20 years, and we have some that we feel like we're constantly replacing. I think one of the things we looked at is when those contracts are up, we've done a better job of looking at the compensation package. I mean, that's part of it, and being more competitive. But just, again, going back to, besides the monetary component, what do they need to feel supported and valued within the district? And I think that we've done a much better job of that in the last couple of years. There's still room for growth, but I think that if staff members, no matter what their role is, feel seen and valued, and compensated too. I'm not going to say that's not important. That's going to go a long way in keeping staff feeling happy, but also wanting to come back day in, day out to do the work.
Any other follow-up?
For Lunenburg to be successful, we need a staff that is invested in our success and individuals who are capable of wearing more than one hat. Teachers, for example, need to drive excellence and achievement, but it also helps if they can bring their additional talents to extracurriculars, clubs, coaching sports, etc. What hiring practices would you put in place in Lunenburg to ensure that our staff is driving excellence in student achievement while also helping to meet our myriad of needs? And I will point out, you have already
It's
answered
very
this.
touched this.
So we can skip it, so we can.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go on. We will use our time more judiciously. Number 12, please describe a decision you made that in retrospect you wish you had made differently. What did you learn from this process or experience?
I think that around 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a shift to adopt new instructional curriculum materials, high-quality instructional materials, I think everybody kind of jumped in on that, rightfully so. I think there's a lot of great programs and software that's available now to schools and school districts. But with that, you should really do your homework. You should vet those products. You should give the teachers the support and the professional development they need and deserve, and the time they need to really kind of get their hands dirty with the new curriculum. I think overall I've done a pretty good job of that, but at times I think I've been a little bit too quick to implement something, and sometimes that's out of my control. Grant funding opportunity will come about, and you have to kind of jump on it. But I think what I'm trying to get at is go slow to go fast, right? So if we're trying to change a culture around instruction and learning district-wide, you're not going to have everybody buy in on day one. It's just not going to happen for various reasons. Some good, some not so good. But what I really want to focus on is that those individuals who embrace the new ideas, the change, and really eat it up, and they really put the time in and use those teachers as exemplars to really model what we're doing. I'll give you one example. We went to Denver, Colorado in early April as part of the Applied Learning Grant, and we saw 4 different high schools and 4 different public schools that were exemplars for this concept of applied learning. And what that is in a nutshell, it's a 1-8 foundation piece, but really it's one of the leading edges of this applied learning concept is really focusing on student voice. So when you go into a classroom that you see this applied learning in action, you see kids. You don't see the teacher in front of the students just lecturing for an hour. It's the kids leading that conversation. It's the kids knowing what they need to do as far as expectation and assessment, which takes a lot of thoughtful planning by the teacher. But the kids are the ones who are driving their own learning. And it's really profound to see when you see it done well. And we've adopted some of that work, and we're doing that now. And I think that's, you think about a district like Lunenburg, you're making those shifts with instructional, high-quality instructional materials. You want to take those teachers who are doing a fantastic job and really showcase what they're doing, whether it's interreading, for example, or Open SciEd at the middle school science level. Those are really shifts with instruction. Those are real shifts with learning. And it takes time to build the capacity of those teachers, but we want to really kind of put them on a pedestal in some ways about the work they're doing, because that work, the hope would be for that to translate to other students and grow from that core group out. And you see that both in the individual schools and district-wide.
We have 10 minutes left. Any follow-up?
My turn.
I think so.
Again.
Again.
What do you anticipate will be the most difficult part of this job? What parts of this role do you think you'll require the most support in? And what would that support look like?
I would lean on support from the team, the leadership team. I think that if we have a tight-knit group, if we have a team that embraces the vision of the district, we have a team that embraces psychological safety and being able to be confident and free to say what they think is the best or not the best idea for our students. I think we're gonna move the needle. We're gonna really see continued growth. For me, it's always been a struggle. It's that work-life balance, right? I throw myself into this position. I always have. I think it's something that I'm passionate about. I go back to my initial statement. I look at student success, student achievement is the leading edge of what I do. If our kids are not improving, then what else do we need to do? If we're not providing new opportunities for our kids, how can we change that? So I think it starts with the leadership team, building principals, the directors, but it's also it's having a very reliable two-way communication, two-way communication with the school committee as well. Not that necessarily we're going to agree on everything, but I think that the role of the school committee and the superintendent is very important in moving these initiatives forward. And we look at the financial aspect of the district moving forward. I think we need to have those ongoing conversations about if I show you the impact of these positions being cut, then it's contingent on the school committee to make those final decisions. But if we don't have those conversations before general meetings, I think some of the work's being missed. I think we need to have those subcommittee meeting conversations. We need to have meetings with our principals to talk about the impact of these positions, this personnel, these programs, so that the members of the committee have a full idea of what's going on and what could be lost as we move forward. So I think first and foremost, it's the team. I think that when I've performed at my best, it's because I have a trusting, hardworking, competent team. Humble, hungry, and smart is kind of what we talk about. The ideas behind Lencioni's building a successful team. Those are things we try to really embrace. And if we have those concepts in action, I think we can do great things.
Any follow-up? All right, that is the end of our questions. At this time, we would welcome you to have the closing statement.
Well, again, thank you for your time this evening, but also all day today. It was a pleasure getting to meet your staff, or some of your staff. I didn't meet everybody today, but some of your students, all your building principals, assistant principals. And like I said, there's a lot of tremendous things going on in Lunenburg Public Schools. And I think that there's an opportunity to make that even better. And I think that continue to foster that team environment, that team culture. I think that we can do some great things here for Lunenburg students and families. And to continue that conversation around how do we offer new programs, new initiatives, and new opportunities for all of our kids. And I welcome that opportunity. I look forward to working with some variation of this committee in the near future, but I think that there's a lot of great work to be done here. I think you have the right people in the right spots, and I think that we can do some tremendous heavy lifting in the next couple of years. So I'd be very excited to be part of this team.
Thank you. Thank you for spending the day with us and coming tonight. Also want to remind the public too that we do have the surveys available in person and online that you can fill those out for all candidates. At this time, I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 8:42 p.m.
Motion adjourned.
Second?
Ms. Brzezowski?
Are we doing?
We're just going to roll call
Okay.
vote. Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore?
Yes.
Ms. Archambault?
Yes.
Mrs. Sculberry? And an aye for myself. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.